Again, yes, I've stepped in to fill the slot on Jerusalem. So mine are really, and this was only yesterday, so bear with me while I get my thoughts in order. First of all, the thing that has really hurt me the most over the last year is that my city, Jerusalem, has been declared the capital of an apartheid state. That is so painful, that this beautiful city, this city that should be a city of peace, has been hijacked by an apartheid state and a nutty American president. When the occupation of 1967 started, East Jerusalem was taken by Israel, and they decided to treat the Palestinians of Jerusalem differently to everyone else. They have a unique status, and some people are not aware of their status, so that's what I wanted to start with. First of all, both of my parents were born in Jerusalem. Both of them were born in Jerusalem before Israel was created. They are the people of the land. It's as simple as that. And I always say that peace will come to Palestine and Israel when my mother, who lives with me in Birmingham, is able to go back and live in her homeland. That is when peace will come. And just following on from what Virginia was saying, it is when the Israeli public begin to understand that, and they themselves begin to say, we don't want to be a dominating nation of another people, that people who came from this land have a right to return, that things will improve. So in 1967, what happened was the Palestinians were given in Jerusalem a status which is different to those in the West Bank and different to those within Israel's internationally recognized borders. To this day, though, they remain stateless. So what they have is what is called a Jerusalem ID card. I was hoping to bring my wife's to show you, because, but unfortunately she left it in Jerusalem when she was last there a few months ago. And basically, it's the same color, a blue ID card, as the Israeli Jews have, who are citizens. But my wife is only a resident. It is just a residency card. Imagine if you are from London, born and bred, you can show your family history going back hundreds of years, and in London, you don't have a right, you're just a resident. And somebody can take your residency away. And Israel does that. So what Palestinians in Jerusalem have, including my wife, is the residency card. They also have two travel documents. So they have an Israeli travel document, which allows them to fly out of Tel Aviv, and they have a Jordanian travel document, which allows them to go to the Arab world, or at least that was the designation when all of this started. So in a way, they have a better position in that respect than Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, who have now the Palestinian Authority passports. They are travel documents as well. People sometimes have difficulty in dealing with what a travel document actually means. So that's another division. You've got, and I'm sure we're going to allude to the different categories, but the Palestinians in Jerusalem have this unique position. So they live in East Jerusalem. They're able to travel all over the land between the river and the sea, whether it's Palestinian Authority area or Israeli areas, whereas those in the West Bank and Gaza can't go into Israel proper. And in terms of the West Bank, of course, people can't come to Jerusalem without a permit, which again is really very painful. As a child who used to go right up to 1972, I seem to remember, you could just get on a bus from Jericho and go to Jerusalem, but now you can't. There's a physical wall that stops you doing that. Now, the uniqueness of this ID card is that, so it entitles you to residency, but it doesn't stop Israel taking it away. And it has a law. And the law says, if Jerusalem is no longer the center of your life, you don't need it. So we take the residency away. So that applies both to Jerusalemites who have moved abroad, like my wife. She still has an ID card, but we don't know how long it will be kept for. The law apparently talks about 7 years worth of being away, and then they can take it away. Or that if you work in the West Bank or move to live in Nablus or Ramallah, again, they can take it away. So my wife's uncle, who works in Ramallah, has had his, imagine this is a Palestinian from Jerusalem who's still there, has just moved to work somewhere, and they took it away from him, and he's a lawyer, and he's having to put up an Israeli lawyer to try and get it back. That's how it works. Israel discriminates against Palestinians in East Jerusalem in particular with regards to planning law, which it does everywhere, but in Jerusalem it's particularly significant. Because families, you hear them talking about settlements. We need to have, natural growth. That's why we need more illegal houses that should be built. Not for Palestinians in Jerusalem. So, like any other human being, they have children. The children grow up. We Palestinians are good at having lots of children. So lots of children grow up, and they need to marry and move out and have houses. It's virtually impossible for them to buy land in Jerusalem, and even if they have it, to build on it. Israel tries to find ways of saying, you can't build on this plot for this reason. And of course, then, as if you have 5, 6 kids, and they grow up and they want to marry, people apply for planning permission, they don't get it, they build on top of their very tiny plot of land, always knowing they're at the risk of Israel coming and demolishing it, which it does regularly. Whether it's a whole block with 10 families, whether it's one family, they will do whatever they like. So house demolitions is a real issue that they face. In terms of their daily lives, they have a particular problem in terms of discrimination with getting any government papers, like the travel document I described, registering births, all of that sort of thing, renewing their ID card, which they're always worried about losing, because Israel has placed in East Jerusalem illegally a branch of the Ministry of the Interior, which is for 350 or so thousand Palestinians in East Jerusalem. That's the only place they can get these done. Generally, they queue up, and the queue goes down the road, sun, heat, snow, whatever it is, and they make their lives difficult to actually get anything like that done. Ironically, and I understand irony, ironically, you nearly missed that one. But the Jewish settlers who live now in East Jerusalem illegally, they can go to any office to get their papers done. Think about that. Last year, for some reason, and we still don't understand why, they decided that in order to get any of these papers processed, what you have to do is apply for an appointment to go and have it done first. The appointments came, and they were for 6 months down the line. They didn't do that to Jewish Israelis. It was only for Palestinians. Again, so throwing in sort of anecdotes rather than figures, because I think they're just as important. It's interesting that Jerusalem Palestinians who hold this ID card can marry a Palestinian who has full Israeli citizenship, whereas the West Bank Palestinians and the Gaza Palestinians aren't allowed by law. But they can. So if my wife had decided I wasn't the right man and she wanted to marry someone from, say, the Galilee, she could have got Israeli citizenship. And Jerusalem Palestinians can apply anyway for Israeli citizenship, but as you can imagine, they have decided they don't want it. Some do, but they're now finding it even more difficult because they have to swear allegiance to the Jewish state. Why do they sometimes decide to take up Israeli citizenship? Because that's much more secure than the residency card. So that sort of tells. Now, so again, discrimination. An Israeli who wants to come to the UK from Jerusalem, they don't need a visa. But the Palestinian holding an ID card, a travel document which looks exactly the same, needs a visa. They have to go to the embassy and apply for it and get it, and so on. Schooling. Israel looks what it's looking to do is to influence what the Palestinian children learn at school. And it's doing that by insisting that you teach the Israeli curriculum in Arabic, which says that Israel is a democracy, Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, don't think about it as the capital of Palestine and so on. And if this particular school, Mr. Headmaster or Madam Headmistress, want to expand, build more classrooms, you must adopt the Israeli curriculum. So they are trying to influence the minds of the children. Another thing they do is that they are trying to change the perception of whether areas in Jerusalem are Jewish or Palestinian. And that's through the signage. Those of you who've just been and seen it, they show, if you see a sign, it says, first of all in Hebrew, the name of the road or the city, then in Arabic, then in English. So what they've been doing is changing it so that the name that is in Arabic is actually the Jewish name. So the children grow up thinking, this isn't the Mount of Olives, Jabal al-Zaytun, it's someone might help me with Hebrew, yes. So they grow up using that. And of course, Israel has now made Arabic not an official language. So you can imagine that over time, it'll be more and more that government, paperwork and so on, doesn't have to be in Arabic. Guys, why is it? The official language is Hebrew. And so the other thing about the marriage issue is some people who have married from another city, Palestinians in Jerusalem, they are not able, they have to apply for unification, reunification, which isn't always forthcoming. So you have families divided, the husband living in Jerusalem, the wife and children living in say, Bethlehem, and they, in that area. When I myself got married, now my wife comes from the Mount of Olives, as it happens, that's why I gave it a plug. We couldn't have our wedding in Jerusalem because our relatives who lived outside Jerusalem would not be able to come. They wouldn't be able to attend, so we had to have, so now an industry has developed of sort of marriage halls, receptions, and so on, just outside, in what the Americans want to be the capital of Palestine, Abu Dis and Isaiah and places like that. But even when we were thinking about marrying, my wife was much more concerned about her ID than she was about saying how much she thought I was a great man. Because in the long term, I might be gone, but she didn't want to lose her Jerusalem ID card. And that's really, really serious. That is how people think. And then we decided to do something outrageous, add to the demographic threat. Okay? So we decided to have a child, and we have a boy who's 6 years old, and he's called Adam. And when she became pregnant, it was only then it dawned on us, where should she have him? In Jerusalem with her family, or in Birmingham, just with me? What are the merits of the case? Normally I throw this as a question, but we haven't got time to do that today. So if she had had him in Jerusalem, he wouldn't automatically get a British passport. And we don't know how long it would take for him to be included in her ID card and then given the travel document to come here. If she had him in Birmingham, he would immediately get a British passport, but there would then be a battle to add him into her ID card. So in fact, but imagine, this is which Jewish person from Israel has to think about these things? Nobody does. So in fact, we had him in, I said to her, look, the most important thing is that you're able to travel and so on, so she had the baby here. And once she returned, she asked for him to be added to her ID card, and they said, no, first of all, you must add your husband as a husband, change your status, and then we'll add him. And the only way to do that is for you, your husband, and your child to come and live in Jerusalem for 2 years continuously, and then we'll give you reunification. Now, I'm afraid we don't believe that. But in any case, some of you will know that last April I was denied entry to Tel Aviv airport. So that became almost academic. So these are some of the these are some of the things that they face in terms of discrimination. Just think about this. So, if my wife, at some point, because they judge she's been out of the country for too long, loses her ID card, when she actually comes from the land, her family come from the land, compare this with a Jewish person from New York who moves to Israel with no problem, of course, gets citizenship, lives in Jerusalem, and after 5 years they start to go and live in Berlin. They never lose their right to go and live there. That's a discrimination as well. And the fact is also, say, from my wife's side, she has relatives who live in Jordan, who were brought up in Jerusalem, and they can't go back there. So these are some of the problems that the Palestinians face. To be objective, they do in Jerusalem get the same services generally in terms of health, social security as Jewish Israelis who live in Jerusalem. So there are no issues about them getting that service. They have local medical offices and so on. They can go to the same hospitals for treatment and so on. But of course, some Israelis can't cope with the fact that a woman who is an Israeli Jew wants to have a child, that next door to her on the bed could be a Palestinian woman having a child. So some of them, and politicians, have been asking for there to be separation even at birth, for goodness sake. And this is why I say it's the mentality that has to change. It's only when people see the others as equal that this will change. I end on the fact that I started with. This is a wonderful city. Every time I used to travel, and I used to hire a car from the airport and travel around. And actually that was very briefly a really interesting question. If you want to know where Israel's borders are, ask the car hire companies. Why? Because you are insured if you're in the Israeli parts, but you're not if you go to the Palestinian parts. So I asked them the question, what about East Jerusalem? He says, I don't know. And that is exactly the sort of thing that you face. But I remember that I used to get a real, hair on the back of my neck would stand up when I drove for the first time, drove up to the Mount of Olives, and I could see the Dome of the Rock to my right. And the blighters have denied me that right, but I will return. Thank you very much.